Welcome to this Tube Duel Original Explainer. Let's jump straight into the amazing and honestly very long history of the world's most popular sport, football. Whether you grew up calling it football or soccer, this game has a completely fascinating story. We're going to see how a simple game of kicking a ball turned into a massive worldwide event.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start in ancient China, visit medieval Europe, look at how the modern rules were written, check out the first international games, and end our journey at the 1930 World Cup.
All right, Part 1, Ancient Origins in China.
So looking at historical records, there's this ancient game called Cuju, and it really wasn't just for fun. Military leaders like the famous Yellow Emperor actually used it to build up their soldiers' strength and endurance. It was literally serious military training.
Now, early myths say the very first balls were made from a stomach stuffed with hair and straw. I mean, can you imagine kicking that around? A pretty rough start for sure, but it was the spark of something huge.
Over time, the game evolved. You had Beta, which was a non-competitive game where players basically just showed off these amazing juggling skills. And then you had competitive Cuju, two organized teams of 6 trying to score in semicircle goals. What's really cool here is that women played this too. It gave them a rare, public chance to join in and show off their skills.
Moving right along to Section 2, European Mob Football.
Welcome to mob football. And yeah, it was exactly what it sounds like. Entire neighboring towns played against each other with an absolutely unlimited number of players. They upgraded from hair and straw to using an inflated pig's bladder for a ball. Imagine these huge, angry crowds fighting to drag this pig's bladder all the way to the opponent's church balcony. It was so chaotic and violent that King Edward II actually had to ban the sport in London in 1314.
Which brings us to Section 3, Writing the Modern Rules.
For centuries, different schools and towns just played by their own made-up rules. But in 1863, the Football Association formed in London to finally create one standard set of rules. Soon after, in 1871, the Rugby Football Union set down their own rules. And over in America, by the 1880s, a guy named Walter Camp was adding new rules like the line of scrimmage that shaped American football.
So the sport basically split down two totally different paths. You had the kicking games, association football, or soccer, played with a round ball, and then you had the running games where players could actually carry the ball in their hands. That running style became the base for modern rugby and American football. Honestly, this split right here is exactly why you and your friends probably still argue over what the word football really means.
Let's look at Section 4, First International Games.
In 1872, Scotland and England faced off in the very first official international match. It was a massive, highly anticipated moment for the sport, but despite all that hype and energy on the field, neither team scored. Yep, the first international game ended in a 0-0 draw.
The tactics were just wild back then. England used a 1-2-7 formation. They attacked with 7 players at once, mostly relying on individual dribbling. Scotland, on the other hand, went with a 2-2-6 formation, focusing way more on teamwork and passing the ball to each other. And you know what? That passing game was totally revolutionary, and it's what helped Scotland stop a heavily favored English team.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the First World Cup. Only 13 teams participated in the very first World Cup in Uruguay in 1930. Why so few? Well, there weren't any qualifying games, but the Great Depression made travel incredibly expensive. To play, European teams had to spend 15 days just crossing the ocean on a boat to get there. During the tournament, a Frenchman named Lucien Laurent scored the first ever World Cup goal. And get this, he scored it against Mexico during a bizarre winter snowstorm in the southern hemisphere. Laurent later said nobody even realized history was being made right then. They were just freezing cold, shook hands, and got on with the game.
So the final match comes down to the host country, Uruguay, against their neighbors, Argentina. Talk about tense. The teams actually got into a massive argument right before kickoff over which match ball to use. The referee literally had to step in and make a compromise. Argentina provided their ball for the first half, Uruguay used theirs for the second half, and Uruguay ended up winning the game 4-2.
A massive, roaring crowd of 93,000 fans packed into a brand new stadium in Montevideo to watch that final. When Uruguay won, they became the first ever world champions of football, and their country was so thrilled they declared the very next day a national holiday.
So it leaves us with this incredible thought to marvel at. How did a game that began with military training and a ball made of hair and straw evolve into a global spectacle watched by billions today? It's a story of rules, passion, and teamwork that crosses all borders. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep wondering about the history behind the things we love.